Okay, just an introduction to charting. Very important to chart. I think if you watch tennis on TV and look at the coaches in the box, the player's box, very seldom will you see them writing down notes. I think of Paul Annacone writing down notes, Harold Solomon, but not too many where they're actually, as late Jim Verdick would say, they have a clipboard and they're putting their brains down. You've got to write it down. To me, if you're not writing it down, then when the match is over, you're just sharing your opinion. You're just saying, well, this is what I think what happened. You want to know what happened. Actually, years ago, I charted the French Open match between Nadal and Federer, the first time they played at the French in the final. And Matt Wielander on his website, he was just right on. And I don't think that he charted the match. That's just my opinion. But he was right on, knowing that Federer should have come to the net more. For me, I know from memory that Federer came in 17% of the time, and he won 73% of the points. So Wielander indicated he needed to come in more. With charting, Vic Braden says you chart to get objective data on how to practice, how to design your practices. While you're missing forehands wide, you need to go to work and not have a horizontal swing where you're pulling across. Other sports, a basketball player definitely is charted. They know how they're doing from the foul line. Baseball player knows their batting average. A quarterback knows how many times they've thrown an interception. Don't be intimidated by charting, especially in the early age groups. 12 and under, there's not really much going on. It's just these lollipop, rainbow shots, baseline to baseline, and then who misses. It can be discouraging because then young players find out, gee, it all comes down to unforced errors because there's really no forcing. But again, that's just another reason to chart. And the sooner you start, the better. Film a match. You have the pros playing a match on TV, and then use your remote control, pause, and then you can film and chart that way. When you're at a tournament, as I've said before in this course, I grew up playing ice hockey. And again, not to pick on the women, but very often the men go up to the very top row. They just look straight ahead. And they'll talk to someone, but they never look left and right. They just stare at the hockey rink. Where women many times will, when they're having a conversation with their friend next to them, they're turning their head back and forth, and their eyes go off the rink. When you're charting a match, your eyes cannot go off the court. And it's amazing how many times people will interrupt you and just ask you the score. When I go to a tournament, I say there's two types of talk. Bleacher talk, or small talk, or fact-finding information. That's another definition for charting, fact-finding information. Bill Jacobson is a pioneer for charting. He put together what I'm holding right here, the CT-120, in 1982. I used this computer for 17 years. I haven't really found anything, and I have a couple computers, Palm Pilots, that to me don't really do what CompuTennis did. But I think maybe that's because I have to wear glasses, and now with a pen and going up and down, it just hasn't worked as well for me. But being both nearsighted and farsighted. But you don't need to have a Palm Pilot. You don't need to have a computer. But the reason I'm holding on to the computer is just to go through making symbols. Second serve, SS. First serve, FS. Backhand, BH. Backhand ground stroke, BHG. Backhand return, BHR. Backhand passing shot, BHP. It's pretty simple, and we'll put symbols on the written segment of charting. When it comes down to a parent charting for the first time, that's actually how Bill Jacobson put CompuTennis together. He was a world-class tennis player. His son played at Stanford. Also a great tennis player, but he felt like his son wasn't really listening to him. And Bill, very bright, innovative techie, put together the computer program for charting. When it comes down to a cluster chart, Mom, Dad, you're at the match. And you may not want it. You may want to just go for a walk. You may want to be that parent who's the furthest one from the fence. But, I've seen some women be at a match and they just knit. They're nervous. Well, charting is a way to help people who are very nervous. It gives you something to do. A cluster chart, you just have a piece of paper and you diagram a tennis court. Then what you do, and let's just do one example. Player is missing a backhand ground stroke. BHG, 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 BHG. And they played, maybe only charted 10 points. But you have a cluster that out of the 10 points, they missed 4 backhands. And that's what happens, it just repeats itself. But the reason to chart is for players to have knowledge. They need to know when they missed, why they missed. You want to have players be able to realize during the match how the patterns are unfolding. Line by line is my favorite way to chart. You just take those yellow pads of paper with the lines, and then you just go line by line. And it's game number 1. The person I'm charting, for example, is serving. They could be returning. And I'm just going to put down the serve, the return, the key shot, the point ending shot, the score, and then a user stat. Okay, let's go through that. So the serve, the player hits a double fault. It's a double fault into the net. Obviously that's a minus minus. Comes over here, it's love 15, and then I just put negative self-talk. So they didn't have a very good reaction, physical action response to the point. So now I'm on point number 2. Point number 2, they missed their first serve in the net. Their second serve was in play. They hit a key shot. They hit a short forehand ground stroke. So that's a minus. Now their opponent missed a backhand, and I got to put OP for their opponent. So it's a backhand and approach shot in the net, minus minus. Now it's 15 all. And because they won the point, there was no negative reaction, negative self-talk, no hitting the racket on the court. So then later I can just sit down with that player and go line by line, covering point by point. And then you'll see, I did this not too long ago at a match where player would get way ahead, and then they would lose focus, and then they would lose 3 points in a row. So those are 2 ways to chart, the cluster chart and line by line. We teach T-charting to juniors. You take a group of juniors on the road. One junior they've lost in the second round. There's only first round consolation. They're out of the tournament. But you want to have them with a clipboard, say chart 10 points of your fellow junior player from your squad, training squad, 10 points on the serve, 10 points on the return. And then with T-charting, we always do this. People fighting for the market share. Pepsi versus Coca-Cola. Okay, now I know we have RC Cola, but just imagine that there's only the 2. And we're fighting, just like in a match, for 100% of the points. Now, the points are going to end as a plus-plus, which is a winner. Minus-minus is an unforced error. Minus F is a forced error. I'm going to number the point. Point number 1, Pepsi hits a double. I have it on the wrong side. Plus column, minus column. Pepsi hits a double fault in the net. That's how point number 1 ended. Point number 2, now in the plus column, Pepsi hits a first serve plus, an ace. The third point, Coca-Cola just misses a forehand ground stroke into the net, minus. The fourth point, Pepsi hits an aggressive approach shot. But Coke is the last person to hit the ball, and it's a backhand passing shot, wide, minus F, and I circle it. So then later when I go back to make a summary sheet, I know that Pepsi played 3 points. 1 ended in a plus. That's what the ace they hit. One ended as a double fault. and then one ended where they won the point by forcing their opponent to make a mistake. So out of this 3-point sequence, Pepsi has won 2 points and they've lost 1. And if someone could continue to do that, they're going to win the match. They'd actually win the match 6-0, 6-0. So from this, just like with cluster charting, down here at the bottom, we can always just use the tally system. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then how are we doing as far as return to serve? How many return to serves are hit as a plus, hit as a minus, hit as an IP? Plus is strong, minus is weak, IP is in play. So then we count the tally marks, and on the return we say, okay, our opponent, the person we're charting, we could do our opponent. You can flip-flop it. The nice thing about a computer, by just charting one player, you automatically chart the other player. But here, so say if we're charting our player and they hit 35 returns, we can break them down into these 3 categories. We can add to that and say, well, how many times did they approach off the return? How many times did they hit a loser, a minus-minus? How many times did they hit a winner? How many different things could happen on the return? So what happens, the more you know about tennis, the more you can actually chart. When it comes down to, you could go out and chart, and I always say that parents, many times watching their own child play, they will know more about their child's emotions than the coach will. But just to chart their physical action response, just to chart how many times they make a positive reaction, like come on, let's go, where they're cheerleading themselves, opposed to how many times they show negative body language. And just to chart that. It has nothing to do with charting the technique, the airs, or the tactics. Just to chart how do they handle in between points. You can use a stopwatch to chart. You'll find that many times when a player is ahead, they take a lot more time. When a player is behind, they're rushing. Junior tennis, if a player's ahead, they sit down during the changeover. If the player's losing during the changeover, the junior player doesn't sit down. You could film just a few points. And again, it's so important to be able to just go back and give feedback. So that's just a few thoughts on charting.